teachers, I can't thank you enough for taking time out of what we know is your busy December to Remember schedule. Counselors, thank you also for hurrying over here to help us get everybody settled in. I appreciate everybody here. This is almost just a week or so shy of your winter break, so I hope you guys are excited. I want to ask you guys to do a warm welcome. So if you could put your hands together and do a warm applause for Mr. William Kuntz. Wow, 8th grade, I'm very impressed. We're actually going to rehearse a little chant here every now and then. This is a very special person, not just because, for those of you who've been watching the World Cup, if you've been watching the World Cup, raise your hand. And if you have not 8th grade, you still have time, because there's a game on December 9th, right, coming up, and December 10th. I will tell you guys that this gentleman right here is somebody very important to me because I do enjoy soccer, but more importantly, he does a couple of things, and one of those is managing our local LAFC team for soccer. If you've heard of them, give us an applause, and if you haven't, Google them. Now, if you're a Galaxy fan, so sorry. But not sorry, because we beat the Galaxy this year. LAFC did win. And so this gentleman here not only does that, we have a nice relationship too, because my cousin is married to him. So it works out quite nicely. Yes. And yeah, my cousin, they're related, which is great. So we're family. Now he's going to give you guys a special presentation. By the very end, we'll make some time to do a bit of a Q&A. I have some questions from some of our student leaders in here. Evan, where are you at? Raise your hand. Evan? There we are. There's one of our student leaders, Evan, who wears a couple of hats in ASB and another old cultural connection group. We're going to make sure that question's already on one of our slides, Evan. So we'll bring that up with Will in a second, okay? Now, having said that, Mr. Desai, could you go ahead and click to the next slide? And just go ahead and click on that image. I know we're battling the skylights. This is a recap here. Was this against Philadelphia? And they went through, scored, and it was pretty big in turning point for the team, right? I think you can fill them in on a lot of that. But this was a big turning point where they went on, and LAFC went on to win the Cup, the Major League Soccer Cup. This year for 2022, there was a big parade I saw online, it's on YouTube, and Mr. Desai, you can click to the next screen. So Will, I know that you have a lot planned here. We're kind of running up against the clock, but we will save our Q&A. We're going to try this chant here, and I'm going to do like a rough try here, but there's a chant where if I say Al, you say... If I say... Why don't you try, Will? Let's give him a warm applause, 8th grade.
We'll give this my shot. Right, so I'll say LA, you guys say FC. All right, so LA! FC! All right, one more time. LA! FC! That's pretty good. Thanks to Snoera, although I thought we couldn't have phones in here, so we'll talk about that selfie a little later. Thank you guys for having me. It's been a really long time since I was in 8th grade, but I know there's nothing worse than a boring speaker, so thank you for being here. Are you guys done with, anybody done with their exams yet? It's finals week or so. Okay, so also paying attention while you got finals to worry about. I'll get into myself a little bit and my path to LAFC, but first I just want to do a quick exercise. I think it'll be pretty interesting. So please stand up if you're a first generation American. So that means if your parents immigrated here from a different country. Stand up. Now, stand up if you speak a language other than English at home, or if there's a second language other than English being spoken. Please stand up. All right. Now, stand up if you are, or consider yourself to be a minority or a person of color. What? Everybody stay standing. If you can't stand, stay standing. But if you're a minority or person of color, please stand up. So just take a quick look around. All right. Well, some of you guys are confused. That's okay too. But hey, if you take a look around, and if you're sitting, that's totally fine too. It's totally fine. But if you guys take a look around, if we did this exercise at 99% of the 8th grades around this country, I think most of the people who are standing are sitting, or they're not here, and most of the people who are sitting are standing. And what I think that really means is that you guys are different, and this might be normal for you, this type of diversity in terms of cultural backgrounds, experience, time. You guys can sit. Sorry, you guys can all sit. But like in the rest of the country, like that's not the case. And you guys are now 8th graders, right? And I know it's hard to be 8th graders because you're about to go to high school again, but and you guys will go to different high schools, right? And then some of you will go on to go to different colleges. And sort of as you guys move on, you get more and more dispersed across the country, across the continent, across the world, right? But most of the places that you guys go will be less diverse than where you come from. And I think it's really important for you guys to understand, because I think you can probably feel it right now in the world. It's a bit of a divided place, and people are tense and a little bit scared. And I think we are really afraid of what we don't understand and what we haven't seen before. And you, although it's not fair to ask a group of 13 and 14-year-olds, you guys have seen more cultural diversity. You guys have experienced more people of different backgrounds, different faiths than almost everybody you'll come into contact with going forward. And it's really important that you don't take this group and this moment for granted. I know it's really hard to be in 8th grade, to be in finals, to be ready for winter break, and then it kind of feels like you're ready for the next thing, but you still can't move on. But take some time to appreciate where you're at now and the group you have around you. And I know that sounds like a really heavy message, but I, like Mrs. Laura said, work for a soccer team, and a big part about what we do is put together a team from people who come from all over the world. The really great thing about working in soccer, sounds like we got some South Korea fans in the house watching this World Cup. It's an international game. If you go anywhere in the world, you can connect with people on the ground over the sport. But that also means when you're trying to put together as strong a team as you possibly can, you're going to have to bring in people from all over the world because there's just too many good players in too many different places. And so knowing that the people you're bringing in are going to be able to adapt to life, not just in the U.S., but in our locker room where we have people from different backgrounds is really important. And so I'm from Brooklyn, New York, a hyper-diverse place as well, New York City, but in my time, it's something that I've really come to appreciate more and more is like how much the group I was with in 8th grade and then in high school was different from so much of what I come across. And so a little bit about that, I grew up, like I said, Brooklyn, New York, born and raised. I played basketball growing up, and in college I went to a small school in Western Massachusetts. When I was in college, I got an internship working for the New York Yankees in baseball, so something very different. I spent 3 summers as an intern for the Yankees, and then got a job there full-time working in baseball operations. So I spent 7 more years, 10 years total, working in baseball. I went to law school at night because I think my father didn't think I would be able to last in baseball, so he wanted me to have something to fall back on. And then after 10 years of baseball, I went to go work at the MLS League office for 3 years, and then came out to help build LAFC in 2017 before the team had even been built. Our first season was 2018, so came out here to help put the roster together. Has anybody been to one of our games? Gold star for you. All right, yeah. You guys are great. But one thing I think I'm really grateful for in this path, and it's not the typical sort of progression, right? Like most people will tell you if you want to work in soccer as an executive, you should probably start working in soccer as soon as you can. And I'm here to tell you that people will say, hey, if you want to do X, Y, or Z, right? And I think you have all been asked, and you all think, hey, what do I want to do, with my career, with my life, with the next, X number of years. And people say, okay, well, if you want to be this, right? If you want to be in finance, then you should take this path. If you want to be a sports executive, this path. If you want to be an entertainment executive, take this path. And I think it's really not worth it to listen to people who sort of say that. I think the key thing is to always think about, all right, what do I want to do? And then, what do I really need to do in that job, right? What does it mean to be an executive at a big agency, right? What does it mean to be a sports executive? And then how can I get that experience? Because I'll tell you, working in baseball as a baseball scout has made me better at negotiating soccer contracts, right? It's part of what the job entails. And so I think for all you guys right now, and you have your entire lives ahead of you, just really think about what is possible, and then think about what each thing you're doing, what will help you, right? It's tools in your tool belt. Any job is an opportunity, yeah, but don't let somebody tell you it has to be X, Y, or Z, right? Think about what you want and see if you can kind of work out how to go get it. Sounds sort of like strange advice, but something that I wish somebody had told me in 8th grade because it would have saved me a lot of worry. So, I know we had some questions from the audience, it's a terrible picture of me, by the way, my goodness. Okay, all right, so I guess now let me tell you. So, who says Brazil? All right, Brazil. All right, Argentina? Okay, all right, wait, China in 2026. Okay, so we got China in 2026. Portugal's got the loudest things.
Yeah, I wasn't listening.
I guess Portugal. Oh, who I think's going to win? This Brazil team, in terms of how they put together, that diversity. So, kind of what I was talking about, right? I don't know if you guys saw this quote. I think it was Lucas Paqueta. He was talking about, because the Brazil team, they do big elaborate dances every time they score a goal, right? And they scored, how many goals did they? 6, 5, whatever it was. So it's a lot of dancing. So people are complaining about Brazil's dancing, and they're talking about how everybody, when they do the celebration, it's all 10 guys in the field dance together, and everybody brings a little something in their background. Brazil is another one of those hyper diverse places. I think it's Paqueta was talking about. I bring my game from where I grew up. So I would rainbow the bus drivers, I would nutmeg the mailman, I would elastico the drug dealers in the favela, right? Like, he took the skills and tools that he learned, growing up on the street in Brazil, and now is bringing those into play with the national team. So I think when you had a group that's as talented and that comes from as diverse backgrounds as the guys in Brazil do, it's tough to root against.
One of our questions was, how do you handle winning versus losing?
That's a really good question. So I don't handle losing very well. I'm a very competitive person. But I think over time, I started my career in professional sports 19 years ago. And so, when you start out, all the wins are great. Every win is like, oh man, this is fantastic. I think over time, the wins kind of feel a little more like relief. And so, I have to train myself to think back to what it was like when you're just starting out, right? And find ways to appreciate the wins. But what I would say is that I think, my time playing sports in 8th grade, right, was really beneficial. I know a number of you are some people in like a theater club or a drama club. That's another way to go out and perform, right? Some of you guys might be on a debate team, student government. A number of student groups that I can't think of right now. The AV team, right? You guys have to capture content and then cut it on a deadline. You have to clip it. You have to present it to somebody and say, hey, here's my edits. A lot of people don't have a chance to fail when they're growing up, and then their first opportunity to fail comes after college or their first job, right? I mean, nobody wants to fail, but the opportunity to fail now is really valuable, right? So whether it's, hey, I might miss a deadline, or I might not get the shot that I want, or I flubbed my lines, or we lost that game last night. you know, I think that's really valuable. I think all that helped me sort of handle the stress of being in professional sports, because at the end of the day, you know, right now you guys are in control of your own destiny. If you don't study for your science test, that's on you guys, right? I could do the best job possible. We could put the best team on the field, and our guys get hurt or the ball doesn't bounce our way, and it's totally out of my hands. And so that's where I think a lot of the hardship that we go through losing, whether it's you know, in sports, in drama, being part of a team like the band, I mean, that's really valuable. It's a really good question.
So currently your job is with LAFC, but what was your dream job when you were maybe their age or younger?
Yeah, I don't think I'd quite come to grips with not playing for the New York Knicks when I was your guys' age. I think that was still the dream, but I don't know. I think I wanted to work in sports, but it's also like, oh, maybe I'll be a cool lawyer, you know, like work with the detectives on Law and Order.
Law and Order.
Not to date myself, but.
And education-wise, you didn't go into sports media or anything like that, your background?
Yeah, no, and there are a lot of sports development programs out there, sport management programs out there. I think they can be helpful, but you know, like I said, I was lucky enough to start working for a team. But when I jumped to soccer, for example, I went from the Yankees, which was a massive baseball team, and then moving to soccer, I said, all right, well, I'll go work for the league office for a little bit. People kind of scratch their heads. I said, why? It's like, well, if you go work for the league office, you get a different experience, right? Like you work for the league office and you're dealing with teams in one office, and what that means is you get just a different level.
We're going to play this clip really quick, and then we're going to open up some, Q&A on that one. So, Mr. Desai.
I don't even think it's debatable. This is the best game I have ever seen in this league.
So that was on the field after we won the MLS Cup. I don't know if you guys watched the game, but what Mr. Lira was talking about, and it just gives you like a little flavor of the diversity we have. So it starts with Garrett Bale, who's Welsh, and he signed with us because he was getting ready to represent Wales in the World Cup. So he'd only been there for a little bit. Chicho Arango, you saw with the Colombian flag, who was almost in tears. Came to us. He's from Medellin, born and raised. He's high-fiving with Jose Cifuentes, our Ecuadorian midfielder, who was also in the World Cup. And so, it's just like it's a different mix of guys who all come together for that one goal. And you see sort of what they put into it and how close they've become over time, even though they hail from totally different backgrounds.
So just to be clear, who will win? You're predicting Brazil?
Yeah. I'll go with Brazil.
You're predicting, and you're a numbers person, right? We have some math teachers and math classes in here, but you're predicting Brazil.
Yeah, it's a pretty safe bet.
Okay, safe bet. Are there any staff or teachers that would like to ask a question before we move it over to the crowd of students? Any staff that have questions, whether it's soccer related, school related, anything like that? Don't be shy. Mrs. Flores, I feel like there's a question brewing there. Okay, well, we have a question from Mrs. Flores.
So when you came in, asked the students to stand up and talked about the diversity and things like that, how was that? Was that a struggle for you coming up? What do you see now? Like, has it changed?
It's a really good question. So I am black, and coming up, there are not a lot of black sports executives. There were maybe 2 in baseball, none in soccer when I started. There's, I think, 2 others now in soccer. It's a really interesting question when you look around at it. If you look at the percentage of players in any sport, take soccer for example, that aren't white, and the number of coaches that are, the percentages are wildly off. And so right now in the game of soccer globally, there's a lot of conversation about how can we expand this pool of coaches, right? It's impossible that all the best managers in the world happen to be of one ethnic demographic. And so things are changing. I think we could see a lot more change, but I'm encouraged. Again, some of you watching the World Cup now, you'll see that, all right, France, has a black goalkeeper, right? Like that's something that just wouldn't happen in these countries in years past. And so something that's really encouraging, but I think we still have a long way to go.
Thank you, Will, and thank you, Mrs. Flores. We have a student question over here. He, if I'm not mistaken, plays soccer. Yes, Caesar? Oh, you can go ahead and ask your question. I don't know if maybe one day you're going to be on the LAFC roster, but I don't see him there.
Besides Brazil, who do you think would win the World Cup?
So runner-up, right? Good question. Let's give a hand applause for Caesar. So, Will, you are a master of numbers, recruiting, building rosters, and traveling everywhere to build a team, and this year the winning team. But Caesar's asking, who is going to be that runner-up playing against Brazil?
I have to think about who's on what side of the bracket, but again, I'm gonna go with diversity. And if France is on the other side of the bracket, now France won the last World Cup, but their level of diversity, when you look at where their players come from, because it's not just France, it's the French colonies, so parts of Northern Africa, parts of Western Africa, parts of France, and just the Parisian suburbs alone are very different demographically, but there's a lot of really good talent there. So again, I think in these World Cup competitions, what you see is the strongest teams, the teams that have the most collective spirit that come together and conquer. So.
Okay, I'm going to make sure, I want to give we have a great question over here. This is one of our phenomenal teachers who also knows the game of soccer, Mrs. Gibbons. Let's give her an applause, you guys.
I have two questions. You said you traveled, so the best place you feel like you've traveled to, and do you have a favorite player to work with?
Travels and favorite player. I love that question, Mrs. Gibbons. All right, Will.
Okay, so the second question is a total trap, and I can't answer that. But I'll tell you, the favorite baseball player I ever worked with was a guy from the Oakland area, the Bay Area, by the name of CeCe Sabathia, who was a left-handed pitcher, and what made him so great was that he was a guy who, when he signed with us, it was huge money, like a $260 million contract or something like that. But was always the guy who would take care of the rookies, would make sure that everybody felt comfortable. He worked hard, but he also set like a loose, encouraging tone. And so, I would say that the favorite guys that we work with now are guys that do those same things, because those are the types of guys that help you win. Favorite place traveled. So I think I had to chunk it up into two, not to cheat, but I think there's just the coolest place that you've gone. And I think that would probably be going to Buenos Aires in Argentina, especially when you go, at the time I was in New York, but when it's the middle of the winter in New York, it's the middle of the summer in Argentina, because it's on the other side of the world. And so a really cool, beautiful country. And I think the coolest experience I've had traveling internationally was in 2020, we went to León in Mexico to play León in the Champions League. And when we got on the bus, we had a full armed, like we've had police escorts in the US where it's a couple of these cops on bikes and the lights. We're talking like army, like guys with like machine guns in the back of pickup trucks, and then you drive into the stadium, and there's thousands of people outside the stadium, throwing stuff at our bus, and there was like a full-on bruja, like a witch with a chicken, and like she was throwing chicken blood on our bus as we walked past. So that was probably my favorite traveling experience. A little bit different, but yeah.